Well, good morning. I want to thank you and the Central Bank of Chile and the Statistics Conference team for inviting me to discuss the challenges related to COVID-19, how we're addressing them, some of the key lessons learned along the way, and how we're moving forward in the emerging post-pandemic world. You'll hear similarities to the Chilean experience. Let me start with the US statistical system. Next slide, please. And give some context. The Bureau of Economic Analysis is one of many agencies in the decentralized and diverse US federal statistical system. Statistical agencies represent a wide variety of subject matters, from transportation, health, and education to labor, consumer spending, and business activities. And all of these areas are affected by the COVID-19 crisis. The success of our system derives from core strengths and partnerships with one another. And in terms of core strengths, we provide long time series and consistent definitions to trusted, widely used data sets that also serve as benchmarks for the development of more novel products. We also have access to federal policymakers and deep expertise among our staff in the statistics for economic activity and other subjects that provides insights into data needs and also the ability to respond quickly. Next slide. My organization, BEA, or the Bureau of Economic Analysis, produces some of the world's most closely watched economic statistics, including US gross domestic product, corporate profits, and international trade flows. Our mission is to promote a better understanding of the US economy, providing the most timely and relevant economic accounts data. To do this, we rely on the source data and expertise flowing from our partner agencies, who you just saw in the statistical system, as well as private data to accomplish this mission. And to paint a picture of the challenges and opportunities presented by the pandemic, today I'll spotlight examples from BEA's experience as well as the broader statistical community. Next slide. And let me start and frame the issues by saying that crisis is an opportunity. Just like a natural disaster is a stress test for physical infrastructure, like bridges and the power grid, shocks like recessions and the pandemic present statistical agencies with unique circumstances through which to take stock of our products, programs, processes, and progress. A crisis provides a valuable lens to evaluate our strengths and weaknesses. What worked well? What didn't? Are there areas where we're investing too much, too little? How can we shift plans and priorities to meet evolving demands and expectations? And this isn't a new idea. The idea of crisis as an opportunity has been with us long before the pandemic. The roots of BEA statistics can be traced back to world-altering events of the first half of the 20th century. The lack of information to drive the recovery from the Great Depression and to plot the course for the wartime economy in the 1940s highlighted the need for comprehensive economic statistics, from which our national accounts were born. More recently, the explosion of new financial instruments and the subsequent financial crisis that began in 2008 exposed the importance of improved economic statistics and more timely data across the economy. Out of this crisis also came a growing demand for statistics on well-being and how everyday people share in economic growth for the United States and for countries across the globe. Crisis also accelerates trends and intensifies forces already at work. This reality impacts both the products we provide and the programs and processes we use to process them. For example, the pandemic is accelerating the digital economy. Who would have thought that we'd order our groceries through an app, which people do around the US now, and work from home every day? So let me turn now to the impact of the pandemic on our products. The pandemic has accelerated demand from our data users, investors, policymakers, and everyday Americans for more timely, in-depth data to guide their decisions and better ways to extract, analyze, and visualize those data. The crisis has accelerated our efforts to leverage new data sources and advanced data science techniques to meet those demands. For example, for the last several years, BEA has been exploring ways to use big data, for example, near real-time card transactions, including credit cards, and massive databases of healthcare claims to extend, enhance, and supplement our official statistics. We were able to expand on this earlier work to stand up COVID-related research, dashboards, and analytical tools in a very short time frame across the statistical system. And then there's the effects of the crisis on our programs and processes. Since March 2020, most statistical agency employees have been working remotely, and we made this change practically overnight. My colleagues were all working from our homes, and I must say, it's just been truly impressive what everyone has accomplished. In my over 30-year career, this is the first time I've ever teleworked. I feel like an old pro now, 18 months into it. And while this has been a big adjustment, the move to maximum telework has yielded other benefits that'll persist. It's enhanced our IT communication skills, our ways of sharing information, and we definitely won't go back to the old way of doing business. We'll benefit from these innovations. And notably, our ability to leverage crisis as an opportunity wouldn't have been possible without ongoing investments and innovations that didn't take place in a vacuum. For example, at BEA, the pandemic reinforced the importance of IT modernization. Over the last several years, we've been moving our data and systems to the cloud and integrating online collaboration tools into our day-to-day work. And we certainly would not have accomplished all we have over the last 18 months without these earlier investments. So we can't afford to waste a crisis. It's critical to reflect on our experiences, embrace the lessons learned, and then continue to make strategic investments and innovations that will make us a more robust system in the long run. Next slide. I'd like to spend the bulk of my remaining time walking through a few of the key takeaways from the pandemic around the themes of the core of our value, promise of innovations, importance to transparency, and the power of partnerships. So let me take the first lesson and next slide around the core of our value. U.S. federal statistical data drive decision makings by governments at all levels, businesses big and small, and everyday citizens. Throughout the pandemic, statistical agencies continue to improve our core products. For instance, at the end of September 2020, actually a year ago this week, BEA issued for the first time our industry by industry breakdown of GDP, GDP by state or regional measures, alongside the quarterly estimates for GDP at the national level. This was the result of a years-long effort to speed up the releases of the industry and state GDP statistics and develop the systems and processes to release them simultaneously. Having this coincident release of these three data sets gives users a fuller and more timely view of the US economy and will provide powerful tools for looking across the economy and understanding the rapid shifts in economic activity from the coronavirus crisis. And it wasn't easy to deliver on that commitment to begin releases in September 2020. Being preceded by months of 100% remote work. However, as we told ourselves, at the time, it couldn't have been more valuable to have comprehensive information on statistics for the second quarter of 2020 GDP, where we saw rapid decreases in the economy. Let me turn now to the promise of innovation, the second lesson. Next slide, please. The pandemic presented statistical agencies with the opportunity to develop new products and services in a rapid-fire environment. At BEA, we've embraced this opportunity, leveraging alternative data sources, advanced analytic techniques, and new technology. For example, BEA economists are researching the use of daily feeds of card transactions data as an early barometer of US consumer spending. And we've benchmarked this to existing survey data. This data set gives us the opportunity to analyze shifts in spending before traditional data sources become available. And initial results of this work were released in a research paper in April 2020. And then we update the data approximately every 2 weeks on our website. And we have extremely positive responses from our data users. You'll hear more about these efforts from BEA's Associate Director for National Economic Accounts, Eric Stroessner, later this afternoon. And let me turn to another example of innovation, next slide, from the National Center for Health Statistics, or NCHS. They repurposed an existing survey to collect COVID-19 related health information and released experimental statistics on topics like telehealth use, quarantine behavior, and loss of work due to illness. In addition, NCHS dramatically accelerated the release of its death count statistics, publishing preliminary reports from states on a daily basis. Can we turn now to the third lesson, the importance of transparency? And the value of statistical agencies hinges on public trust in government data sets, definitely one of our core values. The uncertainty of the pandemic only highlighted the need for timely communications around government statistical offerings, and certainly brought many new users to our data. And so transparency is a big part of our COVID response strategy. US statistical agencies leveraged a wide variety of mechanisms to communicate the impacts of the pandemic on our statistical products and the new products that we put out. We published explanations of new statistics and the changes in methods, provided guidance on how to interpret data impacts, and did this through frequently asked questions, or FAQs, special analytical tables, and technical notes. And the slide shows parts of the BEA website where we feature COVID information and the extensive documentation to be transparent about what we're doing. And one example is that we found, and I'll do this through a focus on personal income. Next slide, please. Where BEA economists analyzed the legislation for the recovery programs to look at how they fit into the national accounts. And we also provided data on the way that they fit into the different parts of the accounts for state, industry, and national accounts. So we have special tables, and here's a chart that we've been publishing with monthly personal income that isolates the effect of special pandemic programs on personal income. And then this isn't just BEA. Other statistical agencies like the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the US Census Bureau are also putting out a wealth of information on the impacts of the pandemic on their statistics. And this helps the public answer questions like, what were the effects of the crisis on employment in different industries and on small businesses in particular? How did these agencies adjust their surveys, assumptions, and calculation methods during the pandemic? Okay, let me turn now to the fourth lesson, which is the power of partnerships. And statistical agencies are casting a wide net to pull in the expertise we need to deliver timely, relevant, high-quality products and services, including partnering with each other and the private sector. And here, let me provide an example where the US Census Bureau launched, not long after the crisis began, the Household Pulse Survey, which collects data quickly and efficiently on how aspects of people's lives, like education, employment, health, housing, and spending patterns have been affected by the pandemic. The Census Bureau disseminates these data sets for the nation, states, and largest 15 metropolitan areas in near real time through an interactive data tool. There's lots of demand for this product, and these statistics have helped federal and state officials direct aid, assistance, and support to people in places that need it most. Notably, the Household Pulse Survey provides information that can't be collected elsewhere, and was enabled through census partnerships with other federal agencies. Without the other agencies' input and support, the Census Bureau couldn't have put out this timely and relevant resource, and it provided a single source to collect the information. Similarly, BEA's work with card transactions data wouldn't have been possible without a long-standing agency with the census, long-standing partnership with the Census Bureau, who went in with us to purchase the data and the data vendor. And this took place several years before the pandemic. Let me turn now to next steps. Next slide, please. And what does all this mean as we venture out in the post-pandemic world? Let me start with what we know. I think we need to build on our strengths. We have a clear mission to provide timely, high-quality data to citizens and decision makers around the world. As I mentioned earlier, statistical agencies have a rich history of delivering trusted data sets with long time series and consistent definitions. Official government statistics are the touchstone for testing the validity of these new alternative data sources and analytical methods that we see cropping up almost daily. We also know what our users are asking for. And we hear demands for higher frequency data, also for more detail by product and industry, and greater geographic granularity. And of course, everyone wants these data now and through easily accessible platforms and formats. And how do we make this happen? I think, one thing is to look back at lessons learned. Next slide. And, we just talked about these 4 lessons around the core of our value, being able to provide relevant, accurate, reliable, and timely statistics. And we have to continue to improve those statistics. People want better GDP, better trade, better income statistics, and we need to continue those investments. We need to embrace the promise of innovation, new data sources, new techniques, and use those to provide new data products. Also, transparency, I think, is something looking forward, is as we do new things, we have to be very clear about what they mean, how they relate to existing products, and explain our processes, plans, and priorities going forward. We also need to harness and continue to harness the power of partnerships, to work together and bring in expertise from academics and the private sector. Let me turn now to just a couple other innovations that we're doing at BEA. And this is in response to calls from our user community. One is going beyond the GDP statistics. And we heard about this in the introductory remarks, the growing demand in the US and around the world for statistics that go beyond traditional economic measures to tell a better story about well-being. And as part of these efforts at BEA, we've released prototype statistics that take one of BEA's primary economic indicators, US personal income, and measure how it's distributed across households. And we provide various measures of distributions. Here you see quintiles, but we also have deciles and other ratios. And this provides a new mechanism for assessing how households share in the nation's economic growth. Next slide. We also have other innovations to provide better statistics on new and emerging parts of the economy. The digital economy isn't new, but it's ever changing, and BEA is developing tools to capture its effects on the US economy and global supply chains. Also, the space economy. BEA has developed a preliminary set of statistics measuring the contributions of space-related industries to the overall US economy. And we're also developing and releasing new and updated statistics on other important emerging sectors, such as small business, the marine economy, healthcare, outdoor recreation, and travel and tourism. And next and final slide, looking to the future. I think we can't get too comfortable. I feel like with the tremendous and impressive efforts of our staff and colleagues, we've gone through the pandemic and provide valued information. And we can build on those successes, but there's a lot we don't know. What is the future of our work? How will data sources, tools, and techniques evolve? Our work environment, what will remain from the pandemic? What will we go back to in terms of how we do our work? What's the next major challenge? A financial crisis, a pandemic, or perhaps most likely something else? And what are the next major changes for the economy and society? Just as we couldn't have predicted how digitalization would revolutionize how we live and work, we need to be thinking ahead to what will be the next sea change and prepare for measuring those effects on the economy. And I'll end optimistically. Even with all this uncertainty, I think drawing on our core strengths, our commitment to embrace lessons learned, and ongoing investments and innovations, BEA and the broader US statistical community stand better equipped to harness the waves of whatever storms come our way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary, for your interesting and motivating speech. In these remaining minutes, I would like to deep in some of your topics you already mentioned. We would like to know more about your experience working with partnerships, such as academic and private sector. And we would like to know if you have some arrangement or have you approached these big tech digital platform companies such as Google, Facebook, or Amazon, and how we will be the treatment of the data privacy issues, or you have thinking on that?
Oh, excellent question, and something we think about a lot. And I think for partnerships, some of the most valued have been our long-term partnerships with other statistical agencies. And the Census Bureau and BEA, we don't just share expertise and data. We couldn't do our mission without BEA, without Census and many other agencies. And we talk all the time about what's going on in the data. And we had a partnership to purchase the data that we use from a card transactions company. We're also working with the Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics on other innovative ways to provide more timely data, and have been collaborating with Opportunity Insights, an academic partnership that's using alternative data sources. We also talk to the big companies. I think each one is unique, and it involves a lot of learning and building trust in each other's institutions. And I would say we're still at the beginning of that journey as to how we're going to use that data at BEA and other companies. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics and Census are really making investments and already using some of this alternative data in their collection to complement their survey-based methods. So we're moving forward, but this is really, I think, something that we'll continue to invest a lot in over the next few years. For academic partnerships, we have advisory committees largely made up of academic members. BEA has its own advisory committee, and we have a joint committee on economic statistics with the Bureau of Labor Statistics and Census. And we share some of our thoughts on innovation. We actually had a session at our June meeting for the 3 economic statistics agencies where we brought in policymakers, a journalist, and private sector to share their thoughts on the future of economic statistics coming out of the pandemic. And you actually can watch that session. It's recorded and available on our website. So that's one partnership. And then the economic statistic measurement community is fairly small. We participate in the academic groups that work in this area, and where there's someone who is closely connected to issues that we work on, we'll identify a project and see if they're interested in working with us. And that's been very productive, I think, especially in some of these areas around price measurement that require very deep technical expertise.